Hi everybody, Amanda Betcher here. I am doing, this is my week 3 oral presentation. I'm doing 4.3 Maps in Your Mind. This is by Edward Toulmin, one of the top 50 cited psychologists in the 20th century. And this study covers the psychological area of latent learning and spatial orientation, which both are connected to cognitive behavioralism. So this study is about Toulmin's theory of psychological thinking. Prior to Toulmin's studies, other researchers thought psychology was only about stimulus response theories that examined observable activities only, such as rats navigating through mazes. Toulmin wanted to know, how did the rat learn to go and navigate through that maze? And he found that rats were using cognitive maps, a mental representation of physical route from one location to another. Toulmin studied humans and rats to show the unobservable and internal process that it could be examined. Remember, in the early 1900s, psychology was newly emerging, and learning theorists were in the forefront of making headway, wanting to prove that psychology was a legit science, and that learning theorists focused on hard proof and measurable data. Their thinking was that when any living thing does something, that something can be measured and documented. But the reasons behind why they did that something, how that movement came about, those aren't measurable, and we couldn't see it, therefore it couldn't be studied. So prior to this study, psychology viewed cognitive behavioralism as a stimulus response. So when the rat learns the maze, it is due to correct responses, that they're motivated by a reward. So left, right equals reward. Toulmin had 2 modifications to the previous understanding of these theories. First, that what was happening inside the rat's brain was very complex, and that we needed to understand the full process of the brain function. And secondly, that we can observe this behavior scientifically and objectively, not just directly. So numerous studies were conducted. The article mentioned the 2 most influential, latent learning and spatial orientation. So for the latent learning experiment, he used rats and divided them into 3 different groups. First was the control group. So they were put in the maze every day and received a reward. Second group was the no reward group. So they were put in the maze every day and then taken out, and there was no reward. The delayed reward group, they were put in the maze for 10 days. And then on day 11, a reward began to appear each time they were in it. So the interesting part of this study is that amount of time it took the rats to learn the maze. So the control group, it took 2 weeks, 14 days for them to learn the maze. Now remember, they got a reward every time. The second, the non-reward, the no reward group, didn't receive any reward. They were put in there, wandered around, and that was it. Then the delayed group, after day 10, so 1 through 10, no reward. So they were running around just like the second group. And on day 11, a reward was put in there. It only took them 3 days to find that reward consistently without any mistakes. So that equals 14 days, same as the control group. So the belief is that on the 11th day, the difference is that rats learned the maze while wandering around. And once the reward appeared, they had already had a mental map of the maze, and they knew where the reward was once they knew that it was there. The second study is called the spatial orientation, and it's related to the stimulus response theory. They believe that rats connected the correct maze pattern with a left, right equals a reward. According to Toulmin, the rats knew the location of the reward regardless of the varying maze patterns. So for this experiment, Toulmin took the rats into a simple maze that until they had no mistakes getting the reward. The maze was like an open box, right? So it was a left, right, right, right. Yes, making sure that's correct. And so he then, once they were able to get the reward without any mistakes, Toulmin then changed the reward to a sunburst type maze where there were rows coming out. He kept the reward in the same location, and then rats needed to make the decisions to which of the 12 routes they needed to go to get that reward. The stimulus response theory would suggest that the rats would choose a similar route as the original one, which would be almost like a 9 or 10 o'clock area. But that wasn't the case. The rats went to the most direct route to the reward. This study hypothesizes that all living things produce cognitive maps, and we have a lay of the land comprehension of the world around us. So when applied to the real world, Toulmin theorizes that when it comes to our social environment, we have maps also. So we can develop a narrow map, such as the first map that the rats encountered, and we can become frustrated because we are constantly relying on that initial knowledge and unwilling to see outside the box or see the new maze. A more narrow map can lead to mental illness, prejudice, and discrimination. So many aspects can get in our way, same as the rats, maybe being too hungry, frustrated, and that can cause us to make poor choices. Humans, like the rats, can become over-focused. That's why it's so important to be at our best health so that we don't become focused on past successes and we can see future possibilities. I'm on the fence with this theory a little bit. I can see where it rings true. Like if one or me, I'm not at my optimal health, I can't have optimal focus, therefore I don't make great decisions, I can lead to poor choices, hence mental health issues, prejudice, discrimination. I can see that trickle down. In 1960, Lynch, a researcher named Lynch, took Toulmin's theory and applied it to humans and created 5 categories of environmental cognition. Now, environmental cognition is the conceptualization of places around you, your city, neighborhood, school, campus. Think of like a map key. And this is part of environmental psychology, and it's a relationship between behavior and environment. So he put together these 5 categories of paths. Think of that as roadways or traffic, sidewalks, edges and boundaries. Really isn't a lot of traffic. There's no traffic in that area, but it's a boundary. Nodes are focal points, parks, traffic circles, fountains, places where traffic meets or paths meet. Districts represent a defined area, and landmarks are distinct points that are common knowledge. On the same lines, researcher Bell and Saucer, not sure how that's pronounced, studied individuals while they were traveling. They asked them to remember notable landmarks around them and specific points of interest. They found that individuals with greater testosterone had increased accuracy in their landmark points and points of interest recall. This concludes that the individuals had a clear understanding of cognitive maps. And to make this research more reliable, I think there needs to be more studies done. The brain has shown also through MRIs that the brain documents every step that we take. And it also takes in the activities that we're doing during that time and the experiences that we're taking in, and it kind of categorizes them all together so that they're just all interconnected. And the capabilities of the mind is just amazing. So these studies give a lot of insight in aspects outside of the rat maze, such as how do birds navigate their migration? to the developments of internet. We go through the internet just as the rats navigated the maze through search strategies. And when we find where we want to go, it's easier the next time. We know exactly where to go for it. We don't need to go the same route the first time. We just go straight to it. Researchers have been able to analyze search strategies to allow for more effectiveness when we search the internet. So the pros and cons. The pros of this study is that a lot of doors were open from this study, such as the bird migration and environmental psychology, which emerged from this study. The cons being that for the map to be successful, for our cognitive map to be successful, successfully followed, the individual or the rat needs to be able to develop that map accurately. And that's where Toulmin was talking about when he stated that we needed to have optimal self for the mapping to occur successfully. And also, one of the cons is that the sunburst maze was pretty primitive. It was a sunburst, it went straight to the food. Rats are nocturnal, and perhaps they smelled the reward. So I feel like there needed to be some other studies related to that, maybe more turns, so that the rats needed to do a more difficult search for the reward. So I feel this study does show value to myself and anyone in the class, and really anyone out there, because when we're cognitively aware of our surroundings, we're able to feel, and then we're able to evaluate our actions and change them as needed. So that is the end of my presentation. I can't wait to see everyone else's. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye.